Usually when we look at a weather map, there's this expectation of just complete powerlessness, you know?
Absolutely, yeah.
You see that giant swirling mass of like red and yellow radar heading your way, and it feels entirely binary. We are safely in here, the storm is out there, and you either get hit or you don't.
Right, you're just bracing for impact.
Exactly. We
Yeah.
treat ourselves as these isolated observers, completely separated from the climate by, I don't know, a thick pane of glass. But right now in Sri Lanka, they are facing one of the most brutal El Nino heat waves in history, and people aren't just bracing for the storm.
No, they're taking a completely different approach.
Yeah, they are using quantum biology to actively buffer it. They've formed what they call Maruta Deva Zone groups. And our mission for today's deep dive is to unpack this fascinating stack of research that basically sits right at the intersection of quantum physics, ancient spiritual practices, and, well, modern climate crisis management.
And, their objective fundamentally redefines our entire relationship with the environment. They aren't gathering to, fight the heat wave.
Right.
Instead, these are decentralized networks of citizens. So they're connecting from their homes and temples or online, and they're aiming to cultivate this unified field of biological and emotional coherence.
Which sounds a bit wild at first, right? But the sources we have today are just incredible. It perfectly bridges that gap between hard data and human connection.
It really does. They're operating on the premise that human consciousness is not a passive spectator. It's a measurable, active force in physical reality.
Okay, so before we get into exactly how Sri Lankans are doing this today, we have to understand the science of why they're doing it.
Right, the bedrock of the whole thing.
Because, since we already know the observer effect disrupts classical determinism at the subatomic level, we accept that observation forces a collapse of probability waves. But the immediate question is whether macro-scale human intention can do the same thing.
Especially in a way that actually matters to a community trying to survive a drought.
Right, because a crystal gazer saying consciousness changes reality is one thing, but an Ivy League aerospace engineer saying it is a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, and that brings us to the academic foundation here, which is the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratory.
The Peer Lab.
Exactly, the Peer Lab. It was founded in 1979 by Dr. Robert G. John, and it's worth noting Dr. John was the dean of Princeton University's School of Engineering and Applied Science.
Right, so not exactly fringe science.
Not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, he essentially risked a pristine, globally recognized academic reputation to rigorously investigate whether human intention could influence physical systems.
And to eliminate any mechanical bias or human error, they use these things called random event generators, or DREs.
Yeah, REGs. And these aren't just, digital coin flippers.
Right, they rely on quantum tunneling.
Exactly. They use systems driven by thermal noise in solid-state diodes. So at a quantum level, the behavior of electrons passing through a barrier is just fundamentally indeterminate.
It's pure randomness.
Pure randomness. It produces a stream of perfectly random data, just zeros and ones. If human consciousness has zero effect, the data should map to a perfect 50-50 distribution over time.
Regardless of what a person sitting nearby is thinking.
Right, exactly.
So the methodology was to have operators sit near these quantum-based RGs and simply intend for the machine to produce more ones or more zeros without actually touching it physically.
Yeah. And over 3 decades, Peer accumulated, more than 12.5 million experimental trials.
Wow, 12.5 million.
Yeah. And the data consistently showed small but statistically unignorable deviations from randomness when the participants specifically focused their intention.
Okay, let's unpack this for you, the listener, because there's a lot to wrap your head around. So it's not like the X-Men moving objects with their minds.
No floating coffee cups.
Right, but more like leaning on a roulette table with your mind and slightly tilting the odds over millions of spins.
That is a perfect analogy, yes.
Yeah.
The significance here isn't that humans have a superpower to magically dictate the weather. The significance is the empirical proof that human intention actually interfaces with physical systems governed by probability.
Okay, so John proved that individual intention shifts probability on a microscale. But to understand how this applies to a macro-scale climate crisis in Sri Lanka, we have to look at the laws of amplification.
Right, the natural next step.
Yeah, because if consciousness acts as a force, we need to know if it compounds. I mean, a single farmer's intention isn't going to break a massive El Nino drought.
Exactly. which is exactly what Dr. Joe Gallenberger ran into when he began testing group dynamics.
And he's a clinical psychologist.
He is. He spent decades exploring psychokinesis, or PK, at the Monroe Institute. And what he found was that you cannot force a physical system to change through sheer willpower or frustration.
Oh, interesting. So you can't just be really mad at the drought.
Right. The probability shift only occurs when an individual enters what he called the PK zone.
The PK zone. And the parameters for this zone are incredibly specific, aren't they?
Very. It requires open-hearted awareness, high positivity, a strong intention, and kind of counterintuitively, a complete surrender of attachment to the outcome.
Okay, wait. I'm struggling with the practicality of this. It's one thing to say surrender attachment in a sterile, temperature-controlled lab at the Monroe Institute.
Oh, for sure.
But it's entirely different when a farmer's crop is actively turning to dust in front of them, or a daily laborer is facing heat stroke. I mean, the biological instinct is to panic.
Exactly.
How on earth can a group possibly surrender attachment and feel high positivity when their survival is literally on the line?
Yeah, that is the million-dollar question. Bypassing the amygdala's fear response when a threat is physically present is the central hurdle of this entire endeavor.
So how do they do it?
Well, to understand the mechanism they use, we have to look at the methodology documented by researcher Greg Braden, specifically something he calls the loft mode of prayer.
Oh, this part of the research is fascinating. Braden has such a unique vantage point because he moves between hard geosciences and ancient wisdom traditions.
He really does. And the clearest example of this mechanism comes from his experience in the early 1990s.
During that brutal drought in northern New Mexico.
Yeah, a 5-year drought. And the stakes were virtually identical to Sri Lanka right now. Failing crops, dying livestock, families basically abandoning multi-generational land.
Right, and Braden accompanied a Native American elder, a man he just refers to as David, to an ancient stone circle where his ancestors had traditionally addressed droughts.
Right, and Braden went in anticipating, an elaborate ritual, maybe hours of chanting or active pleading with the sky.
But David didn't do any of that, did he? He simply walked into the circle, stood quietly, closed his eyes for a short time, and then basically announced the prayer was complete.
Yeah, just like that. And when Braden asked him why he didn't pray for rain, David's explanation completely inverted the entire concept of intention.
What did he say?
He said, if I pray for rain, I am acknowledging that rain is not here.
Wow. Here's where it gets really interesting. It's a complete inversion of how most of us face problems.
Totally. To pray for something is to anchor your consciousness in its absence. You are generating a physiological and emotional state of fear, lack, and desperation.
Instead of screaming at the storm to stop out of fear, you're anchoring yourself in the gratitude of the relief.
Exactly. David explained that when he closed his eyes, he engaged his physical senses to bypass that fear. He actively felt the sensation of standing barefoot in deep mud.
Oh, wow.
He smelled the ozone and rain-soaked earth. He visualized the corn stalks fully grown. He basically allowed his body to experience profound gratitude as though the outcome had already happened.
He was vibrating at the frequency of the solution, not the problem. And heavy storms followed hours later, didn't they?
They did. Hours later, powerful storms moved into that specific region of New Mexico, and it broke the 5-year drought.
That's incredible. And look, while we can't empirically prove David's meditation magically dragged a weather front across the desert, the physiological shift is undeniably powerful.
And this is highly applicable to you, the listener, in your own everyday life.
Oh, definitely.
You see this same dynamic play out in modern boardrooms or even at your own dinner table. When you enter an argument intensely focused on not losing or fearing a negative outcome, that fear dictates the physiological state of the room.
Your tension literally escalates the conflict.
Exactly. David's approach is the equivalent of entering that same room already grounded in the feeling of a resolved conflict and mutual respect. The environment often just reorganizes itself to match the dominant resonance.
So mapping this back onto the modern crisis in Sri Lanka, the Maruta Deva Zone groups aren't gathering to beg the sky to stop the heat wave.
No, not at all.
They are gathering to feel the outcome. They are mentally standing by overflowing reservoirs, visualizing the elderly remaining safe, and generating the relief of the farmers.
Right. But scaling this is the real issue.
Yeah, how do you practically force thousands of panicked, exhausted people into that precise biological state of gratitude? That sounds impossible.
Well, you have to utilize specific technologies of consciousness. And for them, it starts with the soul sync meditation.
Okay, tell us about soul sync.
This practice was introduced by Sri Krishnapritha Amma, who is known as Sri Prithaji, from Ekam in India. SoulSync is a really systematic, guided process.
Just a few minutes long, right?
Yeah, just minutes long.
Ugh.
And it's designed to rapidly shift the nervous system out of a fragmented survival state, which he calls a suffering state, and into a beautiful state.
A state characterized by inner harmony, emotional balance, and high coherence. Because when you're in survival mode, your autonomic nervous system is dominated by that fight-or-flight response.
Your sympathetic branch is just running wild.
Exactly. Your focus narrows, your heart rate is erratic, and your consciousness is completely fragmented by fear. You are essentially locked out of the PK zone.
Right. So SoulSync serves as the biological gateway. It uses breath and intentional focus to stimulate the vagus nerve, which acts as a literal brake on that sympathetic nervous system.
It forces a shift.
Yeah, toward parasympathetic dominance. It allows participants to stabilize their internal environment before they even attempt to set a collective intention for the entire nation.
Okay, but human minds wander, right? Especially under duress. I mean, someone might be sitting with their eyes closed, breathing deeply, but internally they could still be terrified about their failing crops.
Walk that danger, yes.
Without an objective measurement, they could just be masking their panic. So how do they know it's actually working?
This is where we bridge the spiritual practice with hard biological data, utilizing research and technology from the HeartMath Institute.
Ah, HeartMath.
Yes. HeartMath studies the physiological phenomenon of heart coherence.
Okay, let's define the exact mechanism of heart coherence for everyone. What is physically happening in the body when someone is in that state?
So coherence occurs when your heart rhythm, your respiratory system, and your brainwave activity all synchronize into a highly efficient, ordered state.
It's like everything is humming together.
Exactly. And HeartMath's researchers found that this biological synchrony isn't triggered by simply relaxing. It's specifically triggered by sustained positive emotions.
Like compassion, deep appreciation, and gratitude.
Right, which perfectly maps onto David's rain prayer in New Mexico and Sri Prathaji's beautiful state.
It's all connected. So when you feel genuine appreciation, it sends a distinct neural signal up the vagus nerve to the brain. And HeartMath measures this through heart rate variability, or HRV.
Yes, HRV. Because, your heart doesn't beat at a perfectly static interval. The time between beats constantly fluctuates based on the push and pull of your nervous system.
So when you're stressed out or just faking your meditation, your HRV graph looks terrible, right?
Yeah.
Just jagged, chaotic, and completely erratic.
Yeah, it's a mess on the screen. But when you hit true emotional coherence, that HRV pattern smooths out into a perfect ordered sine wave.
And the vagus nerve acts like a two-way street, right? Communicating this synchronized state back up to the brain.
Exactly. And then the brain responds by shutting down the release of cortisol and other stress hormones.
And this is where it gets really sci-fi. HeartMath developed portable biofeedback meters to track this in real time. It's basically like a fitness tracker, but for your emotional resonance.
That's a great way to put it.
You attach a small sensor to your earlobe, and a screen physically shows you your HRV pattern as you breathe.
And because it provides real-time biofeedback, it bypasses the placebo effect entirely. You simply cannot trick the monitor.
Right.
Your autonomic nervous system has to fundamentally change. If your mind wanders back to the heat wave and panic sets in, the sine wave on the screen instantly breaks back into a jagged line.
Oh, that is brilliant. It completely removes all the guesswork. This technology takes the invisible, kind of esoteric state of emotional coherence and makes it entirely visible and measurable for everyday people in Sri Lanka.
It's a game changer for them. It ensures that when they sit down to do this work, they are biologically confirmed to be in the correct state.
And if we think back to Dr. Gallenberger's work on the group multiplier effect.
Right, at the Monroe Institute.
Yeah, we know that coherence amplifies dramatically when people synchronize. HeartMath's data reinforces this, doesn't it? Showing that individual biological coherence measurably contributes to a broader social coherence.
It does. It's basically like tuning a fleet of metronomes.
Right. If they're all ticking out of phase, they just cancel each other out. That's essentially human panic in a crisis.
But HeartMath and SoulSync are putting all those metronomes on the exact same resonant surface. Once a critical mass of people achieves biological coherence, the physical resonance actively pulls the surrounding environment into a synchronized beat.
Wow. Okay, so let's bring all the puzzle pieces together and look at the complete Maruta Diva vision in practical action. Picture it. 50 people gathering physically in a local temple or a community center, with others logging in online from their homes.
And they are completely surrounded by a devastating El Nino heat wave.
But they don't start by focusing on the weather.
No, they sit down and execute the soul sync meditation to actively quiet their amygdala. They hook up their HeartMath biofeedback meters and they watch their individual screens.
They use breath and focus until their scattered HRV graphs smooth out into those coherent sine waves.
And they hold that state. They wait until the entire group has biologically proven that they have left the panic behind and entered a true physiological state of gratitude and compassion.
And only then do they collectively deploy their intention.
Exactly, only then.
They anchor themselves in the sensory experience of the solution. They feel the cool air. They visualize the reservoirs brimming with water. They experience the profound shared gratitude of a protected nation. They're effectively leaning on that quantum roulette table together.
Yeah. And the immediate real-world impact of this just cannot be overstated. I mean, even if a skeptic entirely dismisses the Peer Lab's data on probabilistic shifting or Braden's account of weather modification, you still have to look at the undeniable baseline result here.
Right. What does a nationwide network of synchronized, biologically coherent citizens actually achieve in the middle of a climate emergency?
At the absolute minimum, it creates an unparalleled psychological and physiological buffer.
Absolutely, because when thousands of people actively shift themselves out of sympathetic nervous system dominance, you see a massive population-wide drop in cortisol.
And cortisol suppression directly preserves the immune system. It reduces the physical exhaustion caused by heat stress. The community bonds become incredibly deep.
They basically replace the paralysis of climate despair with active, constructive hope. They become physically and mentally resilient to the environment they're forced to navigate. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? The overarching through line of all these sources is a radical redefinition of our role on this planet.
We are not isolated variables.
No. Human consciousness, when biologically synchronized and emotionally directed, is an active participant in our collective survival. True emotional and biological unity isn't just a comforting idea. It's a measurable physiological tool against the despair of a changing climate.
The science really traces a clear path here. From the quantum anomalies recorded in Princeton's engineering labs to the sensory wisdom of a Native American stone circle, directly to biofeedback monitors stabilizing the nervous systems of Sri Lankan farmers today.
The unifying mechanic is that human intention fundamentally alters the field.
When coherent hearts join together, vibrating at the frequency of the solution rather than the terror of the problem, they unlock profound adaptations.
We spend the vast majority of our lives trying to change our external environment through brute force. We argue, we manipulate, we physically exhaust ourselves trying to mold our circumstances.
But, if group coherence can demonstrably alter physical probabilistic systems and rapidly stabilize community biology, it begs a much closer look at your own immediate surroundings. Well, we spend so much time trying to change things by physically manipulating them. But what local environments in your life, your workplace, your neighborhood, your living room, are currently dominated by the chaotic resonance of stress and fear?
That's a great question.
And more importantly, what happens to those spaces when you decide to change the emotional frequency of the room?
Wow. That is definitely something to think about. The next time you look at the radar and see a storm coming, whether meteorological or interpersonal, consider whether you will just brace for impact behind that pane of glass, or if you will recognize how deeply entangled you actually are with the world around you and use your own coherence to shift the odds. That's all for today's deep dive. We'll catch you next time.
So once I told you very often, I keep telling, that people from a village came to me and said, we want rings. In this village, they are notorious, it's not very far from this place, they are notorious for getting drunk and beating their women. I said, stop beating your women and stop drinking, I will give you rings. They said, Bhagwan, let us have a deal like this. You give us rains, we'll stop drinking, we'll stop beating. So a deal was struck. The rains came, they had very good crops. They drank more and they beat more. That thing happened. So man is so clever. He has only ideas of fooling and having a good time. So that is the way people are living. The hearts are closed, there's absolutely no love, no relationship. What kind of life are we leading? What's happening to our families? Go in and see. Continuously nagging, quarreling, fighting, blaming. Nothing is okay. You go to a school, teachers have no love for children. Children hardly respect their teachers. Everywhere it is the same story. You have to pay a price for this. You have a cow in your home, you don't even treat your cow properly. So when is the end to all this? So you look around and see. So I am telling, if you want something in a village, if you want rains, well, let them show some good relationship. First thing I am telling, stop beating your women. So give them some respect, treat them with some love. They are helpless. Start there. And I am assuring you, I will take full care of you, and I have done it. You must also cooperate with them. So let people become more humane. Let their hearts flower. The heart is dead. Absolutely dead. You go to a hospital, you see how the doctors are behaving, absolutely careless. Go anywhere, nobody seems to care. Politicians don't care, medical men don't care, policemen don't care, they do all kinds of atrocities. Lawyers don't care, judges don't care, nobody seems to care. What is this country, tell me? How do you expect nice things to happen? So let people change. There are villages where people have changed and we are giving them very good rains. They are prosperous. There are model villages. Go and see those villages if you want to. You see how dharma is there, how people are there. So you respond, I'll also respond.